The first thing Avery registered was the sound of a wrist breaking. A sharp wet crack that cut through the rain-soaked alley and froze her breath in her throat. Neon light bled across the pavement in violent streaks, red, blue, violet, painting the scene like a crime she hadn't meant to witness. Her Leica dangled from her fingers. Her back hit cold brick. And the man who'd grabbed her a second ago was now on his knees, choking on pain, his arm twisted at an angle no human joint should allow. The stranger who'd done it stood between them, tall, broad-shouldered, rain sliding off his suit like it didn't dare cling to him. He didn't look at the man he'd dropped. He looked at her. Right at her. Dark eyes. Sharp. Calculating. The kind of gaze that didn't ask questions, it made decisions. Avery's pulse roared. She hadn't meant to take the photo. She hadn't meant to see the silver briefcases changing hands behind him. She hadn't meant to catch the wrong moment in the wrong alley in the wrong city. But the shutter had clicked anyway. And now he was here. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, the rain parting around him like it knew better. His scent hit her first, clean steel, expensive cologne, something warm beneath it that didn't match the cold in his eyes. His hand closed around her wrist. Not painful. Just inescapable. The light is perfect, he said, voice low enough to slip under the storm. But your timing is fatal, photographer Nim. Footsteps shifted in the shadows behind him. More men. More danger. The alley tightened around her like a fist. Avery's camera trembled in her grip. She hadn't just taken a photograph. She had captured a moment that was never meant to exist. And the man holding her wrist wasn't deciding whether to kill her. He was deciding whether she was worth keeping alive. 30 minutes earlier, Avery had only been chasing light. The rain in Shinjuku didn't wash the city clean. It stained it. Neon signs bled into the asphalt, reds and blues smearing together like spilled ink, turning the narrow alley into something dreamlike and dangerous. Steam hissed from a ramen vent nearby, curling around Avery's ankles as she crouched low, Leica pressed to her eye, breath held. She lived for moments like this. Unposed. Unfiltered. The city when it forgot it was being watched. She adjusted the aperture by instinct, framing a man leaning against a vending machine at the far end of the alley. He was impossibly still, as if the chaos of Tokyo had bent itself around him. Rain slicked his dark hair back from his forehead, droplets sliding down the sharp line of his jaw. Beautiful, her mind supplied automatically. Dangerous followed a heartbeat later. He was tall. Broad-shouldered. A dark suit cut perfectly to a powerful frame. Rain slicked his hair back from his forehead, revealing a face that looked carved rather than born. Sharp jawline, straight nose, mouth set in a calm line that wasn't soft enough to be kind. He could have been a model if he'd had warmth. But he didn't. He had stillness. The kind that made everything around it feel unstable. Avery framed him. The vending machine light gave his cheekbones a clean edge, like he'd been designed for a camera. Her breath caught as the image snapped into focus. The shutter clicked. And then she zoomed in. Behind him, softened by shallow depth of field but unmistakable once seen, 2 silver briefcases passed from one set of hands to another. The men exchanging them stood too close, shoulders squared, movements precise. Not businessmen. Not tourists. Their shadows stretched long and wrong across the wet concrete. Avery's stomach dropped. Her finger froze on the shutter. She hadn't meant to see that. Before she could lower the camera, before she could step back into the rain and pretend none of this existed, the man at the vending machine moved. He didn't rush. He didn't startle. He simply turned his head and looked straight into her lens. The world seemed to narrow to that moment. His eyes were dark, sharp, assessing. Not the eyes of a model caught off guard. Not even the eyes of a criminal surprised by chance. They were the eyes of a predator who had already calculated the distance between them. Avery's pulse roared in her ears. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed away from the vending machine. His shoes made no sound as he crossed the alley, the rain parting around his broad shoulders like it knew better than to touch him. And now, rain stung Avery's eyes as the alley closed back and around her. Her wrist was still trapped in his hand. The man on his knees was still gasping in pain. The briefcases were still somewhere behind Mingyu, heavy with things that weren't meant to exist. Photographer Nim, he repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Avery swallowed. I didn't know. Mingyu's eyes flicked to her Leica, then to her face. Like he was cataloging her. Like she was an object he needed to assess before deciding if she was worth saving. Behind him, the other men shifted. One reached inside his jacket. Avery saw the flash of metal and her entire body went cold. Mingyu moved again. He stepped between Avery and the men like he was building a wall with his body. His shoulder brushed her, and the contact sent a jolt through her nerves, heat and fear tangled together. The man with the weapon hesitated. Not because he was scared of Avery. Because of Mingyu. That hesitation told Avery everything she needed to know. This wasn't some random alley scuffle. This was hierarchy. Power. Rules written in blood. Mingyu spoke in Japanese, his accent clean, his tone polite enough to be deadly. You're making this messy. One of the men, older with a thin scar cutting through his eyebrow, smiled without humor. The girl saw. Mingyu didn't deny it. His hand reached back, behind him, finding Avery's shoulder. His palm settled there with firm pressure, anchoring her in place. Avery's body reacted before her mind did. Her skin prickled. His touch wasn't gentle, but it wasn't cruel either. It was claiming. Give me the camera, Scarborough said. Avery swallowed. Her mind scrambled through options that didn't exist. Run? Scream? Fight? None of it felt real. None of it felt possible with men who looked like they'd never hesitated before. Mingyu's fingers tightened slightly on her shoulder. Don't, he murmured, just for her. Not yet. Not yet. The words landed in Avery's chest like a lock clicking shut. Footsteps approached from the mouth of the alley, slow, deliberate, accompanied by the faint swish of a long coat. A new figure entered the neon wash, a man with slicked hair and a posture that radiated authority. He carried himself like everyone around him was furniture. The other men straightened. Respect. Fear. Both. The captain. His gaze moved from the kneeling man to the stranger, then to Avery behind him. Avery held her breath. The captain's eyes narrowed. Who is she? Mingyu's hand slid from her shoulder to her waist. The contact was immediate, intimate. His palm fit the curve of her hip like he'd memorized it. Avery stiffened, then realized stiffening would make her look like a stranger. Like a witness. Like a problem. Mingyu leaned back slightly, pressing her against the hard line of his body. Suit-clad muscle at her back, the heat of him cutting through the rain-soaked chill. Avery's heart slammed against her ribs. His mouth hovered near her ear, close enough that his breath warmed her skin. Breathe, he whispered. And hold on. Then he looked at the captain and spoke clearly, in Japanese so smooth it sounded like a blade sliding from a sheath. She is not a witness. The captain's gaze sharpened. Then what is she? Mingyu's grip tightened, not painful, possessive. My wife. He said in English, the word hit the alley like thunder. Avery's mind blanked. Wife? The captain's eyes flicked to Avery's face. Studied her. Judged her. Avery forced herself to soften. To let her body lean back into Mingyu's. To look like she belonged there, held by him, protected by him. But her hands shook. The camera strap felt like a noose. The captain's mouth twitched. Your wife, in Shinjuku. With a camera. Mingyu's gaze didn't change. She's a photographer. She gets distracted by light. He looked down at Avery like he was annoyed with her, like she was a beautiful inconvenience. His thumb brushed the edge of her waist through the thin fabric of her blouse, slow enough to be deliberate. Avery's breath caught. Mingyu's voice lowered, warm and dangerous. Tell him. Her mouth opened. No words came. Mingyu's thumb pressed again, firmer, a silent command. Avery swallowed hard and forced her voice to work. I saw the... She stopped herself, heart hammering. The captain's gaze sharpened. Mingyu's fingers flexed. Avery corrected quickly, the lie tasting like metal. I saw him. She nodded toward Mingyu without turning her head. The rain. It was beautiful. Her voice trembled on the last word. It sounded real because it was. Mingyu's eyes darkened, and for the first time something flickered there. Approval? Amusement? Hunger? The captain stared for another long beat. Then he smiled, thin and sharp. A bride with an artist's eye. Mingyu didn't smile back. He simply tightened his arm around Avery's waist and said, evenly, touch her, and the soul treaty dies before it's signed. The air shifted. Even the rain seemed to quiet for a second. Avery felt it, the subtle change in the men around them, the recalculation. The captain's eyes hardened. This wasn't about her anymore. This was politics. Underworld diplomacy. A treaty written in threats. The captain's jaw worked. Ambassador Park, he said finally. You bring surprises. Mingyu didn't react to the title. He'd worn it since the day his family sent him to Tokyo, the man expected to keep the Yakuza and Seoul's most feared syndicate from tearing each other apart. I bring stability. The captain's gaze slid to Avery again. If she is your wife, she is protected. Avery's knees threatened to give out. Protected meant owned. Mingyu's hand moved to the small of her back, guiding her forward. We're leaving. The captain raised a hand. The camera. Avery's fingers tightened reflexively. Mingyu's voice dropped to something colder. The camera belongs to her. A beat. Then with deliberate concession, Mingyu reached for Avery's Leica, not taking it, just curling his fingers over hers so the Yakuza could see. Like it was shared. Like everything about her now fell under his jurisdiction. The captain studied them as if he was looking for a crack in their performance. Mingyu leaned down, and his mouth brushed the corner of Avery's jaw. It was barely a kiss. Barely contact. But Avery's entire body reacted like it had been branded. His lips were warm. His breath smelled faintly of cognac and something expensive. Smile, he murmured against her skin. If they sense fear, they'll cut it out of you. Avery's eyes stung. She forced her mouth into something that might pass for soft. The captain's stare held for one more moment. Then he stepped aside. Go, he said. And keep her close, Ambassador. Mingyu didn't respond. He simply walked, guiding Avery out of the alley like he owned the path beneath their feet. As they reached the street, the city swallowed them. Crowds, umbrellas, taxi lights, laughter spilling from bars. Tokyo moved on, unaware that a treaty had just been held hostage by a lie and a girl with a camera. A black sedan waited at the curb. The door opened without anyone touching it. Mingyu's hand tightened on Avery's waist. Inside. Avery hesitated for half a second, long enough for his gaze to cut down at her. Not unkind. Unyielding. She climbed in. The car smelled like leather and quiet power. The door shut, sealing her in. Rain drummed on the roof like a heartbeat. Mingyu slid in beside her. Too close. His thigh pressed against hers, warm through his suit pants. His presence filled the space until there was no room left for air. Avery's breath came shallow. She clutched her camera to her chest like it could protect her. Mingyu's gaze dropped to her hands. Memory card, he said. Avery swallowed. It's in the camera. His eyes lifted to hers. Give it to me. Avery's fingers tightened. It's my work. A beat of silence. Then Mingyu leaned in. Not rushing. Not threatening with volume. He brought his mouth close to her ear, voice so low it felt like a secret pressed into her skin. You took a photograph of an exchange that wasn't meant to exist, he said. That makes you valuable to people who will not negotiate. Avery's stomach twisted. Are you going to? She couldn't finish the question. Kill me. Mingyu's gaze didn't soften. But something in his posture shifted, microscopic, controlled. No, he said simply. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be quiet. Avery shivered. His hand slid to her thigh. She jerked, startled, not because it hurt, but because it was so intimate, so possessive, so wrong in a moment like this. Mingyu's palm stayed there, heavy and certain, pinning her in place without force. Listen to me, he said. From this moment, you don't speak unless I tell you. You don't look away from me when someone asks you a question. You don't reach for anything. Avery's pulse hammered. You can't just, his fingers pressed slightly. A warning. His eyes locked on hers, dark and endless. I can, he said. And I will. Because you are alive right now for one reason. Avery's throat tightened. Because you said I'm your wife? Mingyu's mouth curved, barely. Not a smile. A dangerous acknowledgement. Because I claimed you, he corrected. And in my world, a claim is a contract. The car moved, sliding into traffic, neon streaking across the windows like wet paint. Avery's hands trembled around her camera. Mingyu watched her for a long moment, then reached up and gently, almost gently, tugged the camera down from her chest. He flipped it with practiced ease, opened the compartment, and removed the memory card. Avery's breath caught. Hey, his gaze flicked to her mouth. Avery fell silent. Mingyu slid the card into his pocket like it weighed nothing. Then, without warning, he hooked 2 fingers beneath her chin and tilted her face toward him. Avery's heartbeat stopped. He studied her closely, eyes scanning every detail like she was a photograph he was trying to understand. Your name, he said. Avery. Avery, he repeated, like he was tasting it. Then softer, good. His gaze lifted again. Surname. Her stomach tightened. She hesitated, just long enough to register as fear. Avery Carter. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Calculation? He nodded once, committing it to memory. Avery swallowed, forcing herself to speak through the rush of nerves. What happens now? He leaned back slightly, giving her just enough space to breathe, not enough to forget him. Now, he said, you tell me why you're in Tokyo. I'm on holiday, she answered quickly, truth tumbling out easier than lies. 3 weeks. I travel alone. I take photos. I get lost on purpose. A tourist, he murmured. Yes. He looked at her again, properly this time, not like a problem, not like leverage, but like a variable he hadn't planned for. And the camera? He asked. It's always with me, she said quietly. I don't shoot people. Just light. Places. Moments. Something in his expression tightened, not anger. Interest. Silence stretched between them, thick with rain and engine hum and everything unsaid. Finally, he spoke. My name is Park Mingyu. The name settled into her chest with unexpected weight. Not because it sounded dangerous. Park Mingyu, she repeated softly. Yes. The corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile, but something close enough to be unsettling. And now, he said calmly, Avery Carter on holiday in Tokyo becomes my responsibility. Her breath caught. Responsibility, how? His gaze locked onto hers. Mingyu looked out the window, watching Tokyo's lights smear past like a dream. Now, he said, calm as a verdict, you become my wife. Avery's mouth went dry. I didn't agree to that. Mingyu turned back to her. The car's dim interior caught the angles of his face, carving him into shadow and light, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. You can refuse, he said. Avery's breath hitched with relief, and die, he finished, tone unchanged. Silence filled the car, thick as the rain outside. Avery's eyes stung again, this time with furious helplessness. That's not a choice. Mingyu's gaze didn't waver. In my world, it is. The car slowed at a red light. Their reflections floated in the glass, her small tense form, his large composed silhouette beside her. Avery swallowed hard. Why me? For the first time, Mingyu's expression shifted. Not soft, but focused. As if the question mattered. Because you saw me, he said finally. And because you captured something that can burn the treaty, the Yakuza, and me. Avery's stomach dropped. So I'm leverage. You were, he said. Now you're protected. Avery's voice cracked. By you. Yes. The certainty in his tone was the most frightening thing of all. The car rolled forward again, deeper into Tokyo's neon veins. Mingyu leaned in close one last time, voice dropping into something that sounded almost like possession and almost like a promise. From this moment, he murmured, you don't speak. You don't look away from me. You are with me, he finished, eyes dark and lethal, or you are dead. Avery stared at him, breath shaking. And somewhere deep inside her, beneath the fear, beneath the outrage, something else stirred. Because the way he said it didn't sound like a threat alone. It sounded like a vow. Tokyo at night wasn't a city. It was a maze. Avery felt at the moment they stepped out of the car in Ginza, the way the streets folded inward, how doorways appeared where walls should be, how sound seemed to travel underground instead of through the air. Bass throbbed beneath her feet, pulsing up from somewhere unseen. Laughter spilled from behind lacquered doors. Smoke curled from vents like breath. Mingyu's hand settled at her waist as if it belonged there. Not tight. Not gentle. Certain. She wore the dress he'd chosen, deep wine silk, elegant and deceptively modest, cut to soften rather than expose. It made her feel composed. Dangerous in a way she wasn't used to being. Stay close, he murmured as they entered the private Ginza club. Velvet swallowed sound. Gold leaf caught the low light and turned it molten. Incense burned somewhere unseen, layered with whiskey and heat and something sharper, ambition maybe. Men sat in quiet clusters, suits dark, voices low. Women lounged like ornaments, watching everything. Eyes tracked them instantly. Mingyu didn't slow. He guided Avery through the room as if it were his own living space, hand firm at her waist, body angled subtly to shield her. Every movement said the same thing, mine. He brought her here to make a statement. Avery felt it in the way conversations dipped as they passed, in the way men straightened, in the way women's eyes narrowed with curiosity. Mingyu wasn't introducing her. He was announcing her. They reached a private alcove, not a table he'd been invited to, but one that cleared the moment he approached. Men rose without being asked, stepping aside with murmured greetings and lowered gazes. Ambassador, one of them said, bowing slightly. Mingyu acknowledged him with the barest tilt of his head. Evening. Their attention shifted to Avery. So the rumor is true, one man said, voice smooth with interest. Mingyu's hand tightened a fraction at her waist. Yes. The men studied her openly now, not with disrespect, but with a sharp curiosity reserved for something rare, something dangerous, something claimed by someone more dangerous still. And then she felt it. A stare. She didn't turn at first. She didn't need to. The air changed when attention sharpened into hunger. A Yakuza lieutenant across the room had fixed his gaze on her, too long, too deliberate. His smile was lazy. Proprietary. Mingyu noticed instantly. His hand tightened at her waist. Not enough to hurt. Enough to warn. He leaned down, lips near her ear, voice barely audible beneath the music. Don't look. She didn't. The lieutenant's smile widened anyway. Mingyu straightened, eyes lifting, just once, to meet the man's gaze. The smile vanished. The lieutenant looked away. Avery's breath left her in a quiet rush. You didn't have to, she murmured. Yes, Mingyu said. I did. His hand stayed at her waist, steady and unyielding, as if daring anyone else in the room to try again. They left soon after, slipping through a side corridor lined with mirrors and velvet curtains. The club dissolved behind them into tunnels and staircases and a world that existed entirely below the city. The honeymoon began that night. He took her everywhere. Underground bars where passwords changed hourly. Private lounges behind unmarked doors. Mingyu's jacket draped over her shoulders when the air turned cold. His body positioned subtly in front of hers in crowds. His hand never left her, waist, back, hip, a constant point of contact that told the world she was untouchable. And told her the same. In a hidden jazz bar, bass vibrating through the floor, he leaned close to whisper instructions that sounded like intimacy. His breath brushed her ear. Her skin prickled. You're enjoying this, she accused quietly at one point, watching the city slide past from the back of a car. His gaze flicked to her. Am I? You like having control? A beat. Yes, he said. I do. And me. He didn't answer immediately. When they finally reached the hotel, an ultra-private tower overlooking the city, it felt like stepping into a pause. Glass. Stone. Silence. The suite was vast, all soft lighting and restrained luxury. Tokyo glittered beyond the windows, distant and unreal. Avery dropped her shoes and turned to face him. How long does this go on? Until the treaty is signed. And after? Silence. She folded her arms. You don't get to just move me like furniture. Mingyu's jaw tightened. You're alive. That's not the same as being respected. The words hung between them. For a moment, she thought he'd snap. Instead, he exhaled slowly. You think I don't know that? He said. Do you think I wanted this complication? Then why keep me so close? His gaze locked onto hers, dark and intense. Because distance is dangerous. She took a step closer. Or because you don't know what to do with me. Something in his expression fractured. You look at me, he said quietly, like I'm not already decided. Avery's voice softened. Because you're not. He laughed once, short and bitter. I was raised to be a weapon. And yet, she said, you're the only one who's treated me like a person since this started. The silence stretched. Then Mingyu stepped closer, close enough that she felt his heat, his restraint, the tension wound tight beneath his control. You're dangerous, he said. Her heart pounded. So are you. His hand came up, not to her waist this time, but to her jaw. Fingers warm, steady, tilting her face up. Their breaths mingled. For a heartbeat, nothing existed but the space between them. His thumb brushed her lower lip. She inhaled sharply. Their mouths hovered, close enough that the promise of it made her knees weak. Then, restraint. He pulled back, jaw clenched, eyes dark with something that looked like hunger and pain intertwined. If I kiss you, he said, voice rough, this stops being a performance. Avery swallowed. Maybe it already has. He stepped away abruptly, turning toward the windows. Get some sleep. She watched his back, pulse racing, body humming with everything unsaid. Later in the quiet, she lay in the bed he insisted she take, a king-sized expanse of silk and shadow in the penthouse suite he'd swept her into without a word. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Tokyo's skyline, neon bleeding into the room like a heartbeat. The city felt distant from up here. Too far away to help her. Too close to escape. Mingyu didn't sleep. He stood near the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled, the city's lights carving sharp lines across his face. Present. Watchful. A sentinel carved out of restraint. A soft sound slipped under the door. Paper. Mingyu was on his feet instantly, crossing the room with a speed that didn't match his earlier calm. He retrieved the note, scanned it once. The room went cold. Avery pushed herself upright. What is it? He turned. The softness she'd glimpsed earlier was gone, replaced by something lethal, controlled, and terrifyingly focused. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. You have a beautiful wife, Ambassador. Her stomach dropped. Mingyu crossed the room and pulled her behind him, his body a shield without hesitation. Pack your things, he said calmly. She looked up at him, heart hammering. Where are we going? His jaw set. Somewhere safer, he replied. And nowhere they expect. The ryokan rose out of the city like a held breath. Tokyo fell away behind them, glass towers dissolving into darkness as the car wound along a private coastal road. When they arrived, lanterns glowed softly beneath overhanging eaves, their reflections trembling across the still surface of Tokyo Bay. The air smelled of salt and pine and something faintly floral, like memory. Avery stepped out of the car and felt the quiet hit her all at once. No sirens. No bass. No neon screaming for attention. Just water, wood, and night. Mingyu paused beside her, his hand hovering at her back, not touching yet, but close enough that she felt it. As if even here, even now, he was measuring how much space he could allow between them. This place is secure, he said. No cameras. No staff after midnight. Her chest loosened slightly. So we can breathe? He looked at her, something unreadable passing through his eyes. For a few hours. Inside, the ryokan was all warm wood and soft light. Tatami floors muted their footsteps. A private garden opened beyond sliding doors, stone paths, a koi pond, cherry trees stripped bare for winter. Steam curled from the onsen like a living thing. Avery changed into the silk robe left for her, fingers fumbling with the tie. When she stepped back into the main room, Mingyu stood by the window, jacket gone, sleeves rolled, the city reflected faintly across his broad shoulders. For a moment, they simply existed in the same space. No performance. No audience. The silence felt intimate in a way that made Avery's pulse jump. Why here? She asked quietly. Because they'll expect us to hide, he said. Not to retreat somewhere this obvious. She smiled faintly. You think like a chess player. He glanced back at her. I was raised to. Dinner arrived, quietly, seamlessly. A private rooftop table overlooking the bay, lanterns flickering in the breeze. Mingyu guided her through the meal with understated care, pouring tea, explaining dishes, watching her reactions like they mattered. At one point, he reached across the table and wiped a trace of sauce from the corner of her mouth with his thumb. The touch was brief, but Avery's breath caught anyway. They attended a couple's tea ceremony later, alone with an elderly woman who asked no questions and offered no judgment. Mingyu guided Avery's hands gently, his fingers warm against hers, his voice low as he corrected her movements. "Slow," he murmured. "Feel it." She did. Not just the ritual, but him. His patience. His presence. The way he stood just behind her, close enough that she could feel the steady rise and fall of his breath. That night, they shared a private cruise across the bay. The city shimmered in the distance, unreal and beautiful. Mingyu stood behind her at the railing, his arms settling around her waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. She leaned back into him. He stiffened for half a second, then relaxed. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. When they returned to the ryokan, the room was dim and warm. A single futon had been prepared. Avery froze. "There's only one, I know," he said quietly. She looked at him, heart hammering. "If this is about appearances, it's not," he said. "No one is watching." The truth of that hung between them. Later, steam curled around their bodies in the private onsen, water lapping softly against stone. Avery kept her gaze fixed on the far wall, acutely aware of him across from her, bare shoulders scarred, tattooed and powerful beneath the lantern light. "Does it ever stop?" she asked softly. "Being watched. Being used." Mingyu didn't answer right away. "I was made for this," he said finally. "Trained. Sharpened. Pointed." She reached out without thinking, fingertips brushing a scar on his shoulder. He inhaled, not in surprise, but in control, like he was holding something back. Her touch was gentle, curious, reverent. His gaze locked onto hers. "Scars don't break me," he said quietly. "They're the reason I'm the one they trust to keep two syndicates from burning this city down." Later, wrapped in robes, they lay side by side on the futon. His arm draped over her waist in sleep, heavy and warm. Avery lay awake, listening to his breathing, memorizing the way his body curved around hers without trapping her. At some point, she shifted. His breath brushed her neck. Her heart stuttered. Their lips brushed, once, twice, soft as a question. Mingyu pulled back abruptly, jaw clenched. "If I start," he whispered, voice rough, "I won't stop." Avery's chest ached. "Then don't stop." He didn't answer. The next day was too perfect. A rooftop garden dinner. Laughter that surprised them both. Photos taken together for proof, his hand at her waist, her smile real despite herself. She began to see him differently, not just the ambassador, not just the weapon, but the man who noticed how she framed light, who listened when she spoke. That night, a waiter lingered too long. Mingyu's jealousy flared sharp and cold. In the hallway later, Avery confronted him. "You don't get to control everything." "I have to," he snapped. "That's the only way people survive in my world." He pinned her against the wall, close, furious, restrained. His hands stayed on either side of her head, never touching. "You don't understand what you do to me," he said. "What wanting you costs." Her voice shook. "Then tell me the truth." Mingyu opened his mouth. Whatever he was about to say, whatever line he was finally willing to cross, never made it out. A sound drifted in from outside. Wind moving through the garden. Lanterns chiming softly against their hooks. Avery broke eye contact first. "I just need a minute," she said, quieter now. "I can't breathe in here." He hesitated. "Just long enough." "I'll be right outside," she added, already turning, already reaching for her camera like it was a habit she could hide behind. The garden was hushed, lantern light pooling gold against stone. The night felt deceptively gentle. Safe. She lifted her camera, adjusting the focus out of habit. The lantern light blurred, then sharpened. Something brushed her wrist. Not wind. The strap slid free. And then a hand clamped over her mouth. She didn't scream, she couldn't. The lantern swayed as she was dragged backward, her heels scraping stone, the soft splash of her camera hitting the koi pond echoing far too loud in the quiet. Mingyu heard the splash. He ran barefoot into the night, robe flying open, eyes wild. All he found was her camera strap floating in the water. Minutes later, his phone buzzed. A video. Avery tied to a chair. A masked voice spoke. "Come alone, ambassador. Or she dies." Mingyu's expression went dead cold. "I'm coming for you, Jagiya." Tokyo didn't sleep. It hunted. Rain slicked the streets of Shinjuku until neon fractured across the asphalt, reds and blues bleeding together like fresh wounds. Tires screamed somewhere nearby. Sirens wailed and cut off. The city breathed danger in shallow, uneven pulls. Mingyu moved through it like a blade. No entourage. No diplomacy. No restraint. The message replayed once in his mind and then burned itself away, leaving only coordinates and intent. He didn't slow for traffic. Didn't curse the rain. Didn't think about treaties or syndicates or consequences. There was only Avery. The car fishtailed through an intersection, water spraying as Mingyu cut between lanes with surgical precision. His jaw was set, eyes fixed ahead, hands steady on the wheel. Every instinct he'd ever been sharpened into was awake now, calculating angles, exits, kill zones. The city tried to stop him. It failed. Avery's world had narrowed to the scrape of rope against her wrists and the ache in her shoulders. The chair beneath her was metal. Cold. Unforgiving. Her mouth was dry, pulse loud in her ears. Somewhere water dripped, steady and mocking. She tested the ropes again. Tight. Her camera was gone. Her phone. Her shoes. But she was still breathing. That mattered. The warehouse smelled like gasoline and rust and damp concrete. Flickering neon seeped through cracked windows, painting the space in sickly color. Shadows moved beyond her field of vision. Men spoke in low voices. Laughter cut through at once, short, ugly. A mask leaned into view. "Your husband," the voice said, distorted and amused. "He's very feared." Avery swallowed. "You shouldn't have taken me." The masked head tilted. "He'll come." "I know," she said. The certainty surprised even her. Mingyu abandoned the car 3 blocks out. The warehouse loomed ahead, abandoned, skeletal, lit by flickering signage that buzzed like a warning. He moved on foot now, rain plastering his shirt to his skin, shoes silent against puddles and broken glass. 2 guards at the side entrance. They didn't see him until the first went down, air driven from his lungs, body folding without a sound. The second reached for his weapon. Too slow. Mingyu disarmed him, snapped his wrist, and shoved him into the wall hard enough to rattle teeth. He didn't linger. Didn't finish it. Avery first. Inside, the space opened wide, crates stacked like teeth, catwalks overhead, lights stuttering in fits. He could hear voices now. Smell oil and fear. He stepped forward. A gun cocked. "Ambassador," a voice called from the shadows. "You came alone." "Yes," Mingyu replied calmly. "That was the agreement." Laughter echoed. "You're not afraid." "No," he said. "I'm offended." Movement. Too much of it. He tracked it all at once, left, right, above, calculations firing in parallel. They rushed him. The first man fell with a wet sound, momentum turned against him. The second clipped Mingyu's shoulder, pain flared, sharp and clean. He ignored it. Closed distance. Ended it. Gunfire cracked. Mingyu used the environment, pillars, crates, shadow. He moved with brutal economy, every strike purposeful, every choice lethal. He didn't roar. Didn't rage. He erased. Avery heard it. The sounds were unmistakable, bodies hitting concrete, shouted orders collapsing into panic, the clean report of gunfire answered by silence. Her pulse thundered. Hope flared, and fear with it. "Stay back," someone shouted. Too late. Mingyu stepped into the light. Blood streaked his sleeve. His expression was empty, cold as the steel in his hands. The men who remained froze, suddenly aware of the truth they'd invited. He crossed the space to Avery in long measured strides. Her breath hitched. This was him without the mask. Not the ambassador. Not the husband. The weapon. He stopped in front of her, gaze scanning her face, her wrists, the rope. His hands shook once, barely. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She swallowed. "No." Relief cut through him like a wound. He untied her with efficient movements, catching her as her legs gave way. She clutched his jacket, fingers digging in as the world swayed. "I've got you," he said quietly. "I've got you." The remaining men backed away. Sirens approached in the distance. Footsteps echoed from the far entrance, measured, authoritative. Yakuza elders emerged with their guards, faces grim. The leader inclined his head. "Ambassador Park. There has been a breach." Mingyu didn't look at them. His arms tightened around Avery. "There will be recompense," the elder continued. "This faction acted without sanction." Silence stretched. Mingyu finally lifted his gaze. "You're correct," he said evenly. "They did." The elders nodded. Apologies followed. Promises. Restitution. Avery barely heard it. She stared at Mingyu's face, at the blood on his hands, the quiet devastation in his eyes. This was the man who'd stood between her and death without hesitation. And she loved him. They left before dawn. Rain softened to mist as Tokyo exhaled, tension bleeding out of its streets. In the car, Mingyu kept one hand on the wheel and the other on Avery's knee, grounding her, and himself. When they reached safety, he stopped the car but didn't turn it off. "You can't stay," he said quietly. "Not after this." Her chest tightened. "You're sending me away." "I'm protecting you." She turned to him fully. "By cutting me loose?" His jaw worked. "By letting you live a life untouched by this." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "You don't get to decide that alone." He looked at her then, really looked. Fear flickered there, raw and unguarded. "I will ruin you," he said. "Everything I touch breaks." Avery shook her head. "You saved me." He laughed once, bitter. "Tonight." "And tomorrow," she said softly. "And every day you choose not to be alone." Silence. Then she said it, the truth she'd been carrying since the Ryokan, since the near kiss, since the lanterns. "I'm not leaving you." Mingyu's breath caught. The city hummed around them, indifferent and alive. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. For the first time, his voice broke. "I don't know how to be anything else." "Then be this," she whispered. "With me." He kissed her. Not restrained. Not careful. Honest. When they pulled apart, dawn had begun to lift the edge of the sky. The treaty would hold. The danger would recede. The world would continue. But nothing between them was pretend anymore. The room was quiet in the way only places far from danger ever were. No sirens. No neon. Just rain ticking softly against the glass and the low hum of the city somewhere below. Mingyu stood near the window, hands braced against the frame, shoulders tight like he was still holding the night at bay. Blood stained the cuff of his shirt. Avery crossed the room without thinking. She touched his back. Not tentative. Not asking. Just there. He inhaled sharply. "You should sleep," he said, voice rough. "You've been through." She slid her hands around his waist, pressing her cheek between his shoulder blades. His body was warm, solid, real. "Proof." "So have you," she said quietly. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then his hands came up, covering hers. Large. Steady. "I don't know how to be gentle," he said. She leaned into him. "Then don't be anything you're not." He turned slowly, like sudden movement might break the moment. Up close, the mask was gone. No ambassador. No weapon. Just a man who had almost lost the one person who saw him. His gaze searched her face, dark and unguarded. "If I touch you," he said, "this isn't about protection anymore." Avery stepped closer. Her body answered before her mouth did. "Good," she whispered. His hand came to her jaw, thumb brushing her cheekbone with reverent care. The touch was impossibly soft for someone who dismantled men hours earlier. When he kissed her, it wasn't rushed. It was deep. Claiming. Careful in the way only restraint can be. Her fingers slid into his hair. His breath stuttered against her mouth like he'd been holding it for days. He backed her toward the bed without breaking the kiss, movements deliberate, as if committing every second to memory. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. She shook her head. "Don't." That was all it took. He kissed her again, slower this time, fuller, hands tracing her back, her waist, learning the shape of her like he meant to remember it forever. Every touch felt intentional, grounding, real. He pressed his mouth to her throat, her collarbone, lingering where her pulse raced. She arched instinctively, breath-breaking, and felt his control strain, not snap but bend. "I've never chosen anyone," he said against her skin. "Everything in my life was decided for me." She cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. "You're choosing me now." Something in his eyes gave way. He laid her down with care that felt like devotion, body hovering over hers, close enough to promise everything without taking too much. Their movements were unhurried, exploratory, breath and skin and heat building in quiet waves. No rush. No fear. Only the certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. When he finally rested his forehead against hers again, breath uneven, his hand cradling her hip like it was sacred, he whispered, "I won't cage you." She smiled, tired and glowing and certain. "I know." He pulled her into his chest, arms wrapping around her fully this time, not guarding, not shielding. Holding. Outside, the rain softened. And for the first time since Tokyo, the night didn't feel like it was waiting to take something from them. The gallery breathed. Soft light washed over concrete walls and polished floors, warm enough to invite, restrained enough to command respect. The murmur of voices rose and fell like tidewater, curators, collectors, critics, all orbiting the same quiet gravity at the center of the room. Avery stood beneath it. The photograph hung alone on the far wall, framed in matte black, unassuming at first glance. Grainy. Night dark. Neon bleeding into rain. A man leaning against a vending machine in Shinjuku, cigarette glowing like a distant star. The ambassador. People kept drifting toward it, drawn without knowing why. They stood longer than they meant to. Some leaned closer, as if the image might whisper something if they listened hard enough. Avery watched from a distance, a glass of champagne forgotten in her hand. She wore emerald silk tonight, simple lines, bare shoulders, confidence that didn't need explanation. The months since Tokyo had settled into her like a second spine. She stood straighter now. Saw more clearly. She felt him before she saw him. Mingyu's presence was still unmistakable, even in a room full of power. He moved quietly, dressed in charcoal instead of black, no tie, no entourage. His world had shifted, legitimate ventures, boardrooms instead of backrooms, but the wolf hadn't disappeared. He'd simply learned when to bare his teeth. He stopped behind her, close enough that the heat of him brushed her back. "You still see too much," he murmured. A smile tugged at her mouth. She leaned back into him, comfortable, certain. "I just know where to focus." His hand settled at her waist, familiar, grounding, chosen. Not a claim this time. A partnership. Around them, the gallery hummed on. Someone laughed softly. A critic gestured animatedly toward the photograph. A collector asked about prints. Mingyu watched it all with quiet amusement. "They're afraid of him," he said, nodding toward the image. "They should be," Avery replied lightly. "He's terrifying." "And yet," Mingyu said, eyes on her reflection in the glass, "you made him beautiful." She turned to face him, her expression softening. "I made him honest." His breath caught, not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for her to feel. Later, when the crowd thinned and the night leaned toward its end, they stood alone before the photograph. Tokyo stared back at them, frozen in rain and neon, and a moment that had changed everything. "That night," Avery said quietly, "I thought the camera was the most dangerous thing I owned." Mingyu smiled faintly. "You were right." She laughed under her breath, then sobered. "Do you ever miss it?" "The danger?" he asked. She nodded. He considered it honestly. "No," he said. "I miss the clarity. But not the cost." His hand slid down to hers, fingers interlacing. The ring on her finger caught the light, simple, elegant, real. No pretense. No threat. Her choice. Their choice. "I used to think love was leverage," he said. Something you protected or destroyed. And now? She asked. And now, he said, pressing a kiss to her temple, it's home. They left the gallery together, the city of Seoul opening around them, bright, alive, forgiving. Outside, the air was crisp, the night calm. No sirens. No shadows stretching too long. Just the future. As they walked, Avery glanced back once more through the glass, at the photograph that had started it all. She didn't feel fear anymore. Only gratitude. Because sometimes, the wrong place at the wrong time was exactly where you were meant to be.